The rain fell mercilessly on Greenwood Cemetery in Chicago, as if the sky itself shared in the grief that hung over the farewell ceremony for little Tommy, just 6 years old. Emily, the boy's older sister, watched the movement of those present with attentive eyes, while raindrops mingled with the tears that stubbornly trickled down her face. It was then that she noticed him. William Hartley, the construction tycoon, known as much for his fortune as for his austere temperament, approached the site with hesitant steps. His presence caused a discreet murmur among those present after all. What was one of the city's most influential figures doing there? Emily had always been suspicious of that man. There was something in his gaze, usually cold and calculating, that seemed different that day, a vulnerability she had never seen before. She observed as he approached the coffin, his hands trembling slightly as he held a small blue velvet package. With a quick and discreet movement, William slipped the object into the coffin, looking around to make sure no one had noticed. But Emily saw, and that gesture awakened in her a feverish curiosity that surpassed even her pain. She waited patiently until most of those present moved away for the closing moment. With her heart racing, she approached the coffin and in an agile gesture retrieved the package. Her hands trembled as she opened the blue velvet, revealing a golden ring with a delicate inscription, "To Sarah, my eternal love." Sarah. Emily had never heard that name before. Why would William Hartley put a ring with that name next to her brother? The question hammered in her mind as she observed the tycoon during the lunch that followed the ceremony. Seated in a corner of the parish hall, Emily studied William's every move. The man barely touched his food, his eyes lost in a distant point. Occasionally, his hands touched the pocket of his suit jacket, as if searching for something that was no longer there. "Emily?" Her mother's voice, Rachel, brought her back to reality. "Honey, you need to eat something." "I'm not hungry, Mum," she replied automatically, her eyes still fixed on William. "I know it's been difficult, but we need to be strong," Rachel whispered, her eyes red from crying so much. "Tommy wouldn't want to see us like this." Emily nodded, but her mind was far away. The doctors had said that Tommy suffered a sudden cardiac arrest, something extremely rare in healthy children like him. Now, with that mysterious ring, the pieces began to move in her mind like an incomplete puzzle. "Mom," Emily began hesitantly, "do you know anyone named Sarah?" Rachel frowned, thoughtful. "Sarah? No, I don't remember anyone by that name. Why?" "Nothing important," Emily evaded, but her determination was sealed. From that moment on, she would dedicate every free minute to discovering the truth behind that ring and its connection to Tommy. As the guests said goodbye, Emily noticed that William Hartley was one of the first to leave. Through the hall window, she saw when he got into his black Mercedes, the driver carefully closing the door. Before the car left, she had the impression of seeing tears in the eyes of the man who everyone said had no heart. That night, alone, in her apartment, Emily held the ring up to the light, studying every detail of the old jewel. It was exquisite craftsmanship, clearly an expensive and exclusive piece. On the inside, beside Sarah's name, there was a date, March 15th, 1985. "What were you hiding, Tommy?" she murmured to herself as she turned on her laptop. If there was a secret involving William Hartley and this mysterious Sarah, she would find it. After all, promises made to siblings are sacred, and Emily had promised Tommy in their last encounter that she would always take care of him. Little did she know that she was about to uncover a story that would forever change her understanding of family love and forgiveness. The next morning, Emily woke up determined. Taking advantage of her mother resting at an aunt's house, she decided to visit the apartment where Tommy lived. The old building in the Lincoln Park neighborhood held its own history, with its silent corridors witnessing decades of family secrets. Using the spare key she always carried, Emily entered the apartment. The silence was deafening. Tommy's toys were still scattered around the living room, as if he might return at any moment to play. On the coffee table, an unfinished drawing showed what appeared to be a family. Several people holding hands, but one of them was only sketched, as if Tommy didn't know exactly how to represent it. Emily headed to her brother's room, her heart tightening at the sight of the still unmade bed, just as he had left it. On the desk, school notebooks with his childish handwriting still in formation. It was then that she noticed something different. One of the wooden floor planks was slightly loose. Kneeling down, Emily carefully removed the plank, revealing a small hiding place. Inside, she found an old shoebox, yellowed by time. With trembling hands, she opened the box and her heart almost stopped. Dozens of letters, all yellowed, some, with worn edges, filled the interior. The first letter she picked up was dated 1985, the same year engraved on the ring. The elegant handwriting caught her attention. "My dear William, today marks 3 months since you sent me away. 3 months since you chose your reputation over our love. But there's something you need to know. I'm expecting your child. Our daughter will grow up without knowing her father, but I promise she will know how much I loved you once. Forever. Yours, Sarah." Emily sat on the floor, stunned by the discovery. Other letters revealed more details. Sarah was a young woman of humble origin who worked as a secretary at William Hartley's construction company. They fell in love, but his family, traditional and conservative, would not accept the relationship. Leafing through more letters, Emily discovered that Sarah gave birth to a girl whom she named Rachel. Subsequent letters showed Sarah's frustrated attempts to get William to acknowledge his daughter. The last letter in the sequence, dated 1990, had a farewell tone. "William, this will be my last attempt. Rachel is growing up beautiful and strong, but she deserves to know who her father is. If you still have any remnant of the man I fell in love with, I ask that you at least meet her. She has your eyes, you know, and your smile. If you decide to continue ignoring us, know that I will carry your ring with me forever, as a reminder of what could have been, Sarah." Emily stood up abruptly, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fit together. Rachel. Could it be possible? She ran to her mother's room and opened the family album. There it was. Rachel was her mother's full name, who always introduced herself only as Ray. "My God," Emily whispered, feeling the weight of the revelation. Tommy wasn't just her beloved brother. He was William Hartley's grandson, and her mother, Rachel, was the daughter the tycoon had disowned decades ago. But a cruel doubt persisted. If William knew of Tommy's existence, why had he never approached? Why did he choose such a tragic moment to show some kind of remorse? Emily carefully stored the letters back in the box, her brain working at 1,000 miles an hour. There was more to this story, she could feel it. She took out her cell phone and started researching the Hartley family. She needed to better understand who this man was, who had broken her grandmother's heart and abandoned her mother. In the midst of her research, she found an old news article that made her blood run cold. The Hartley family had a history of a rare genetic condition, a condition that, if not treated in time, could cause... Emily couldn't finish the thought. Her hands trembled as she held the phone. She needed to talk to her mother urgently, but first, she would make a visit to the headquarters of Hartley Enterprises. It was time to confront the past and uncover the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. The headquarters of Hartley Enterprises rose imposingly in the financial heart of Chicago, its glass walls reflecting the cloudy sky of that morning. Emily adjusted the blazer borrowed from a friend and took a deep breath before crossing the revolving doors. Inside her purse, the weight of the ring seemed to increase with each step. At the reception, a young woman with an efficient appearance greeted her with a protocol smile. "How may I help you?" "I need to speak with Mr. William Hartley," Emily declared, trying to keep her voice steady. "Tell him it's about Sarah." The name had the expected effect. The receptionist momentarily lost her professional composure, her eyes widening slightly. "One moment, please." As she waited, Emily observed the movement of the place, hurried executives, conversations in low voices, the constant sound of high heels on the marble floor. Everything there exuded power and money, the world that her grandmother Sarah could never be a part of. After a few minutes that seemed like an eternity, the receptionist returned. "Mr. Hartley will see you. Please follow me." The elevator took them to the top floor, where large windows offered a panoramic view of the city. William's personal secretary, a gray-haired lady with impeccable posture, led Emily through a silent corridor to an imposing solid wood door. William Hartley was standing by the window when she entered, his back turned to the door. Even so, Emily could see his reflection in the glass. He seemed to have aged years since the funeral. "So you found the ring," he said without turning, his voice laden with a sadness Emily didn't expect. "Why did you put it in my brother's coffin?" she asked directly. William finally turned, his eyes meeting hers. "Because it was the only thing I had left of her, and because it was the only way I found to ask for forgiveness." "Forgiveness?" Emily let out a bitter laugh. "You abandon your daughter, ignore the existence of your own grandson, and think a ring can make up for decades of absence. You don't understand." William walked to his desk, opening a drawer. "I never wanted to abandon them. It was a decision." "Imposed? Imposed by whom?" "By my father." He pulled out an old folder from the drawer. Edward Hartley was a cruel man, obsessed with status and lineage. When he discovered about Sarah, he threatened her, said he would destroy her life, her family. I was young, cowardly. I believed that pushing her away would protect her. Emily held the ring tightly. "And what about your family's genetic condition? Why did you never warn about that?" William visibly paled. "How do you—" "I researched. The Hartley family's hereditary heart syndrome. You knew Tommy could have been born with it, but you never said anything. If we had known before—" "I didn't know." William slammed his hand on the desk, his hands trembling. "When I found out about Tommy, it was already too late. I tried to approach discreetly, contribute financially through intermediaries, but Rachel, your mother, she never accepted my help, and I couldn't blame her." Emily observed the man in front of her, no longer the powerful businessman, but a grandfather consumed by guilt. "Why now? Why did you decide to reveal yourself just now?" William opened the folder he had taken from the drawer. "Because I found this." He held out a yellowed envelope. "It's a letter from Sarah that was never delivered. My father intercepted it." With trembling hands, Emily took the envelope William was extending to her. The paper, yellowed by time, had a soft and familiar scent, the same she had smelled on the letters found in Tommy's room. The date marked was 1991, just a few months after the last letter she had found. "Dear William, if you're reading this letter, it means I've finally managed to reach you. There's something I need you to know. It wasn't just your decision that separated us. Your father, Edward, sought me out weeks before I left. He showed me documents, evidence that your family carried a serious hereditary medical condition. He said that if I truly loved you, I should leave, because a marriage between us could condemn our descendants. At the time, pregnant and scared, I believed him. I thought I was protecting our daughter by keeping my distance. But now I know he manipulated us all. The condition exists, yes, but it's treatable when diagnosed early. He used my fear and your GAN experience to separate us. Rachel is growing so fast. She's 5 years old now and asks questions about her father. Sometimes when I look at her, I see your eyes, your smile, and I wonder if I made the right choice by keeping her away from you. Edward assured me he would destroy my family if I tried to contact you again. But I can no longer live with this secret. Our daughter deserves to know her origins, deserves to know about her heritage, not just the dark side of it, but also the strength that runs in her veins. If you ever receive this letter, I hope it's not too late to fix the mistakes of the past. With eternal love, Sarah." Emily raised her eyes from the letter, meeting William's anguished gaze. "My grandmother, she tried to protect all of us?" "Yes," William replied with a choked voice. "And I, in my cowardice, never questioned my father. When I finally discovered this letter among his belongings after his passing, it was already too late. Sarah had already departed, and Rachel, your mother, had already built her own life." "But you knew about Tommy," Emily accused. "Why didn't you try to approach before?" William walked to a bookshelf, pulling out a thick folder. "I tried, Emily, in ways you can't even imagine. Look at this." The folder contained dozens of reports, photos, school records, all about Tommy. There were receipts for health insurance, payments, school enrollments, extracurricular activities. "I watched him from afar," William explained, his voice trembling. I contributed anonymously to his well-being through a foundation I created. When I learned that he had started showing symptoms similar to the heart condition, I tried to intervene. I sent specialist doctors to the hospital, but my mother didn't know the true origin of this help, Emily completed, beginning to understand. She was always too proud to accept charity. Exactly, William sighed heavily. And now, I see that my cowardice in not revealing myself earlier cost the highest price possible. Emily observed the man in front of her, no longer the powerful tycoon, but a grandfather torn apart by guilt and regret. However, something still didn't fit. "There's something else you're not telling me," she stated, noticing how he avoided her gaze. What else was in that box that Tommy kept? William walked to his wall-embedded safe, entering the combination with hesitant fingers. 3 weeks ago, Tommy sought me out. Somehow he had discovered who I was. He had found something that would change everything. William took a brown envelope from the safe, his hands slightly trembling. Tommy showed up here on a rainy afternoon. He managed to get past reception saying he was my grandson. Of course, no one believed him, but there was something in his look, the same determination that Sarah had. Emily felt her heart race. The idea of her little brother facing the imposing corporate building alone to find his secret grandfather was simultaneously touching and frightening. "He entered this room," William continued, his voice choked with emotion, "carrying a folder of drawings. But they weren't ordinary children's drawings, they were copies of old documents he had found. Somehow Tommy discovered a hidden archive in my father's old office, documents that Edward kept as a guarantee of his secrets." From the envelope, William pulled out several papers. Some were childish drawings that clearly tried to reproduce official documents, others were old photographs. Tommy had a special talent for finding hidden things. It was as if he could sense where the secrets were kept. "What exactly did he find?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Evidence," William replied, extending one of the papers. "Evidence that my father not only separated Sarah and me, he created an elaborate scheme to ensure we could never meet again. There were contracts, agreements with private investigators, even evidence of blackmail against Sarah's family." Emily examined the documents, some originals, others reproduced by Tommy's inexperienced hand in his drawings. "But why? Why so much effort to keep you apart?" William stood up, walking to the window. The city stretched out below them, thousands of lives following their courses, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that room. Because Sarah discovered something about my father's business, something that could destroy not only his reputation, but the entire empire he had built. What did she discover? Edward had a secret file in the company's old office, documents that proved that part of his fortune came from questionable dealings with corrupt politicians during the construction of major government projects. Sarah worked as a secretary and accidentally found these papers. My father discovered that she knew and used this as another form of pressure to keep her away. Emily processed each new piece of information, the puzzle pieces slowly fitting together. "And Tommy found these same documents?" "Yes," William confirmed. "Somehow he gained access to the old office during a school visit to the company's historic building. That child had an inexplicable gift for finding hidden secrets." "What happened during your meeting?" William closed his eyes as if the memory was too painful. "Tommy showed me everything he had discovered. He didn't fully understand the meaning of the documents, but he knew they were important. He said he just wanted his mother, Rachel, to know the truth about her past. He asked me to tell her everything." "And you promised you would tell her?" "Yes," William replied, his voice breaking. "I promised that on his 7th birthday, I would gather the whole family and reveal the truth." Tommy was so happy. He said that finally his mother would have the complete family she had always dreamed of. Emily felt tears running down her face. "But he never made it to 7 years old." "No," William whispered, "and the guilt eats at me every day for not acting sooner, for not ignoring my pride and my fears, for not—" He was interrupted by a knock on the door. The secretary entered hurriedly, her face showing concern. "Mr. Hartley, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Eleanor is here. She insists on speaking with you immediately." Emily noticed how William paled at hearing the name. "Eleanor? Here?" "Yes. Sir?" "She says it's about the letters she found." William exchanged a significant look with Emily. "Eleanor is my younger sister, and apparently she has her own revelations to make." Eleanor Hartley entered the room like a gust of wind, her perfectly arranged grey hair and elegant posture, contrasting with the distress in her gaze. She stopped upon seeing Emily, her eyes widening in recognition. "You're identical to your grandmother," Eleanor whispered, bringing her hands to her lips. Sarah's same eyes. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. It was strange to hear someone speak of her grandmother with such familiarity, as if she had known her deeply. "Eleanor," William began, his voice tense, "what did you discover?" The lady took out a bundle of yellowed letters from her purse, different from those Emily had found. "I was organizing Mom's belongings. You know, I never had the courage to touch anything since she passed, and I found these letters hidden in a false bottom of her dresser." She placed the letters on William's desk, her hands trembling slightly. "They're letters that Sarah wrote to Mom over all these years. They kept in touch in secret." William let himself fall into his chair, stunned. "How?" "Dad monitored everything, every move." "Mom was smarter than we all thought," Eleanor smiled sadly. "She never approved of how Dad handled this whole situation. She helped Sarah financially during the pregnancy, kept in touch through an old maid who served as an intermediary. She met Rachel when she was a baby." Emily felt her legs weaken and had to sit down. "My grandmother. So she wasn't completely alone?" "No, dear," Eleanor approached, gently touching Emily's shoulder. "Sarah had Mom, and through her I could also keep track from afar. I was there, you know. The day you were born, I observed from afar at the hospital, unable to approach." "Why are you revealing this now?" William questioned, his voice laden with emotion. Eleanor took a deep breath, pulling out another envelope from her purse. "Because I found this last letter. It was written by Sarah shortly before she passed. And she mentioned something about Tommy, something we need to know." Emily leaned forward, her heart racing. "What does she say about my brother?" "The letter is addressed to Mom, but it talks about a discovery Sarah made. Something related to the family's heart condition." Eleanor carefully opened the envelope. "Sarah discovered that the disease wasn't as simple as we thought. There was an experimental treatment at the time, developed by a Swiss doctor. Dad knew about this, but he hid the information from everyone." "Why?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Because the doctor who developed the treatment was Sarah's real father," Eleanor revealed, causing a stunned silence in the room. "Dr. Jonathan Weber. He worked for years researching the Hartley condition, trying to develop a cure. During that period, he and Sarah's mother fell in love, but Dad found out and expelled him from the country, destroying his professional reputation." William stood up abruptly. "Are you saying that Dad not only separated Sarah and me, but also prevented a potential treatment for the family condition from being developed?" "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed. "And there's more. Sarah discovered all of this shortly before Tommy was born. She tried to make contact with Dr. Weber, but a noise at the door interrupted the conversation. William's secretary entered again, her face pale. "Sir, I apologize for the interruption, but Mrs. Rachel is here." Emily felt her blood freeze. Her mother had somehow discovered where she was, and now all the secrets kept for decades were about to come to light. Rachel entered the room, her eyes red from crying, first fixing on her daughter, then on William, and finally on Eleanor. In her hands, a familiar letter trembled, the same one Emily had found in Tommy's room. The silence that settled in the room was dense enough to be cut with a knife. Rachel remained standing at the door, her gaze alternating between those present, while her hands clutched the letter tightly enough to crumple the paper. "Mom," Emily began, but Rachel raised a hand asking for silence. "For years," Rachel finally spoke, her voice controlled but trembling with emotion, "I built my life believing I had been abandoned, that my father had chosen his empire over love, that my mother had fought alone to raise me." She took a step forward, facing William. But Tommy, my son, he knew everything, didn't he? William nodded slowly, unable to look away from the daughter he never got to raise. Rachel, No, she interrupted him. First, you're going to listen to me. I found this today. She held out the crumpled letter. Hidden among my son's drawings, a letter from my mother to you, talking about a doctor, about a cure that could have saved Tommy. Eleanor stepped forward. Rachel, dear, there's so much you need to know. Aunt Eleanor, Rachel let out a bitter laugh. Of course you're also part of all this. How many times did I see you from afar watching me? How many times did I suspect there was something more behind the anonymous gifts that arrived on my birthdays? I wanted to approach, Eleanor replied, tears streaming down her face. Your grandmother and my mother. She tried to protect all of us in her own way. Rachel walked to the window, observing the city below. Tommy discovered everything, didn't he? He was always like that, too curious for his own good, finding things that no one else could see. Yes, Emily confirmed softly. He found the letters, the documents. He knew William was his grandfather. Rachel turned abruptly. And why didn't he tell me? Why did he keep all this to himself? Because he wanted to protect you, William answered, his voice choked. He came to see me, Rachel. Your son, my grandson. He had a plan. He wanted to gather the whole family on his 7th birthday. He said it would be his gift to you. The truth about your origins, about who you really are. Rachel covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Emily ran to hug her mother, feeling her body tremble with contained crying. But there's more, Eleanor said softly, picking up the letter she had found among her mother's belongings. Sarah discovered something about the family's heart condition, something that involves your maternal grandfather, Dr. Weber. Rachel raised her face, surprised. My grandfather? Yes, Eleanor continued. He was a brilliant doctor who dedicated his life to studying the Hartley condition. He fell in love with your grandmother during his research, but my father, when he found out, he expelled him from the country, William completed, shame evident in his voice, and destroyed his research on the treatment. But not all of it. A new voice sounded from the door. Everyone turned to see an elderly lady leaning on a cane, her eyes shining with a familiar intensity. Mom? Eleanor whispered, shocked. The Hartley matriarch, whom everyone thought was in her retirement home, entered the room with slow but determined steps. In her hands, an old and worn folder. 50 years ago, she began, her voice surprisingly firm, I made a promise to Sarah that when the right time came, the truth would come to light. And now, after the departure of my great-grandson, I can no longer keep this secret. Helen Hartley walked to William's large desk, carefully placing the old folder on it. Her eyes, still alive and bright despite her advanced age, scanned the faces present in the room. For all these years, she began, her voice carrying the weight of decades of secrets, I carried the burden of choices that were not mine. Edward, my husband, was a man obsessed with power and appearances, but there was something he never knew. I maintained contact not only with Sarah, but also with Jonathan Weber. Rachel stepped forward, her legs trembling. The man who developed the treatment? My grandfather? Yes, my dear, Helen smiled softly, and he never stopped his research, even after being expelled from the country, even after having his professional reputation destroyed, he continued working. For you, for Sarah, for all who carried the condition in their veins. With trembling fingers, she opened the folder, revealing documents, photos, and detailed medical notes. Jonathan succeeded. He developed an effective treatment for the heart condition. But when he tried to publish his findings, Edward used his influence to completely discredit him. But why? Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why prevent something that could save lives? Because Jonathan's discovery proved something that Edward tried to hide for decades, Helen answered, pulling out a specific document from their folder. The heart condition did not originate from the Hartley family, as everyone thought. It came from Edward's family, the Bradleys, and accepting Jonathan's treatment would mean admitting this truth. William sank into his chair, stunned. All the empire that Dad built was based on the prestige of the Hartley name. If people knew that the Hartley curse actually came from the Bradleys... Exactly, Helen confirmed. Your father's pride and vanity cost many lives over generations. But Sarah discovered the truth. In the last weeks before she passed, she managed to make contact with her father, Jonathan. They were planning to reveal everything, bring the treatment to light. Rachel covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. That's why Tommy... Yes, Helen turned to her great-granddaughter. Your son, somehow, found the letters exchanged between Sarah and Jonathan. He understood, even at his young age, the importance of that discovery. That's why he sought out William, not just to reunite the family, but because he knew he needed the Hartleys' influence to bring Jonathan's treatment to America. Emily picked up one of the documents from the folder, studying it carefully. It was a detailed report on the treatment developed by Jonathan Weber, with impressive results in European patients. But now, Helen continued, her voice gaining strength, there's no more reason to hide the truth. Jonathan is still alive, living in Zurich, and his work, all the treatment he developed, is here in this folder. This is what I promised to keep. For Sarah. Not just the truth about our family, but the cure that could save future generations. William stood up abruptly. We need to make this public. Reveal everything. Bring Dr. Weber back. Implement the treatment here. It's not that simple, Eleanor intervened. His reputation was completely destroyed. Who would believe it now? I believe it, Rachel declared, her voice firm for the first time since she entered the room. And I'll fight for it. I couldn't save my son, but I can honor his memory by ensuring that no other child goes through what he did. Helen smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. Sarah would be proud of you, my dear. She always said you had the same strength she did. The matriarch then turned to William, her gaze intense. Son, now is your chance to do what's right. To correct the mistakes of the past and honor the sacrifice of all who suffered to keep these secrets. William nodded slowly, a new determination emerging in his demeanor. I'll use all the Hartley influence and resources to bring Dr. Weber back and implement his treatment. It's the least I can do for my grandson's memory. Emily observed the scene, feeling the weight of her family's history. So many secrets, so many lives affected by decisions made decades ago. But now, finally, the truth was coming to light, and with it, a chance for healing and redemption. William's office quickly transformed into an operations center. In the hours that followed Helen's revelations, each family member assumed a role. In the mission to bring the truth and Dr. Weber's treatment to light, I've already made contact with our Zurich office, William informed, hanging up the phone. They've located Dr. Weber. He's retired, but still lucid and eager to meet us. Rachel, who had spent the last hour studying the documents left by her mother, looked up. Did they find anything else in the archives about his research? Yes, Eleanor answered, approaching with a stack of papers. In fact, he never stopped developing the treatment. For the last 30 years, he continued working in a small clinic on the outskirts of Zurich, documenting cases and perfecting the procedure. Emily observed everything from a corner of the room, still processing the day's revelations. Her gaze fell on an old photo she found among the documents. It showed a man with a gentle appearance, graying hair and kind eyes, the same eyes she now saw in her mother. Grandma Helen, Emily called softly, approaching the matriarch who was resting in an armchair. How did you manage to keep in touch with everyone for so long without anyone finding out? A cunning smile appeared on the lady's lips. Ah, my dear, a society lady has her resources. Edward was so busy protecting his public image that he never realized his own wife had created a communication network through old friends, loyal employees, and even some journalists who sympathized with our cause. And it was through this network, Helen continued, that we managed to keep Sarah informed about her father's research, and that Jonathan could follow, even if from afar, Rachel's growth. William, who had approached to hear the conversation, let out a heavy sigh. Mom, you're more astute than any of us imagined. No, my son, she replied, her voice softening. I just did what any mother would do to protect those she loves. Edward was so consumed by his obsession with status and appearances that he forgot what really matters. Family. Rachel, who was absorbed in the documents, suddenly stood up. I found something. A letter from Dr. Weber, dated just 3 months. There you go. He mentions a new development in the treatment, something that could make it even more effective. And that's not all, Eleanor added, approaching with her tablet. I just received an email from the University Hospital of Zurich. They have a complete file of the cases treated by Dr. Weber in recent years. The results are impressive. Emily felt a sudden wave of emotion. Tommy would have loved to know all this. He always said he wanted to be a doctor when he grew up. Rachel hugged her daughter, silent tears running down her face. And it will be through him that other children will have that chance. We're going to create a foundation in his name, dedicated to researching and treating rare heart conditions. I've already started the legal preparations, William announced, his voice carrying a new determination. I'm going to call a board meeting today. It's time for the Hartleys to use their power and influence for something truly important. Helen observed the scene with a mixture of pride and relief. After decades of keeping secrets, she finally saw her family uniting for the greater good. But there was still one last thing to be done. Rachel, she called softly, there's something else I need to show you. Something your mother left specifically for you for when this moment came. The matriarch took a small diary from her purse, its pages yellowed by time. This is Sarah's personal diary. She entrusted it to me shortly before she passed, with specific instructions about when it should be delivered. I think now is the right time. With trembling hands, Rachel opened her mother's diary. The soft scent of lavender, which Sarah always used, still permeated the yellowed pages. The elegant and firm handwriting seemed to bring her presence back to life. My dear Rachel, if you're reading these words, it means that the moment I've waited for so long has finally arrived. The day when the whole truth would come to light. There's so much I want to tell you, so much I've kept in my heart all these years. First, I need you to know, every decision I made, every secret I kept was driven by love. Love for you, love for your father, love for the life growing inside me. When I discovered about the family's heart condition, my father, your grandfather, Jonathan was already developing the treatment. He warned me about the risks, about the importance of keeping you under constant observation. But Edward found out, and his threats weren't empty. He had the power to destroy not just me, but everyone I loved. So I did what any mother would do. I protected you the only way I could. What Edward never knew is that, even from afar, I never stopped fighting. I worked in secret with your grandfather, helping to document cases, gathering information that could improve the treatment. Helen was my guardian angel during all this time, keeping us connected, protecting our communications. Rachel, my beloved daughter, I know your life hasn't been easy. I know you must have wondered so many times why you didn't have a present father, why our family was so small. But know that you were never alone. Your father, William, suffered as much as we did with this separation, and now you know, he too was a victim of Edward's pride and obsession. In the last pages of this diary, I left all the notes about the heart condition, everything I learned helping my father in his research. Use this knowledge, Rachel. Use it to help others, to prevent other families from going through what we went through. And there's one more thing you need to know. Throughout all these years, I kept a detailed record of all the similar cases I encountered, people who could have been saved if your grandfather's treatment had been accepted. This list is kept in a special place, in the false bottom of the music box I gave you on your 10th birthday. It's time to give voice to these stories. Finally, I want you to know that I'm deeply proud of the woman you've become. Strong, determined, a wonderful mother. I see in your eyes the same strength I inherited from my father, the same determination that kept us fighting all these years. With eternal love, your mother, Sarah. Rachel closed the diary, silent tears streaming down her face. Emily hugged her while William and Eleanor observed the scene with contained emotion. The music box, Rachel suddenly exclaimed. It's still kept in my room to this day. Hours later, gathered again in William's office, the family examined the list left by Sarah. There were dozens of documented cases, families who had lost loved ones to the same condition. This changes everything, William declared, his voice firm. We can't bring these people back, but we can honor their memories by doing the right thing now. A week later, the main lobby of Chicago Memorial Hospital was packed. Journalists, doctors, and families affected by the heart condition gathered for a historic announcement. William Hartley, alongside Rachel and Emily, stepped up to the podium. Behind them, a large screen showed the image of Dr. Jonathan Weber, broadcast live from Zurich. "Today," William began, "the Tommy Hartley Foundation is proud to announce the inauguration of the first Center for Research and Treatment of Rare Heart Conditions in the United States. In partnership with Dr. Jonathan Weber and an international team of specialists, we will make the treatment developed over decades of research freely available." Rachel took the microphone, her voice choked but firm. "This center is not just a hospital. It's a dream come true, a legacy of love that spans generations. It's proof that it's never too late to do the right thing, to correct the mistakes of the past." Emily observed the scene with a full heart. In her hands, the ring that William had placed in Tommy's coffin, the same ring that started this whole journey of discoveries and redemption. She gently handed it to her mother. Rachel looked at the ring, at the engraved words that now carried an even deeper meaning. "To Sarah, my eternal love." With a soft smile, she placed it on her finger, a symbol that finally, all secrets had been revealed, all wounds were beginning to heal. And somewhere Sarah smiled, knowing that her sacrifice had not been in vain. Love, after all, had triumphed over pride, truth over secrets, life over pain. Tommy's legacy would live on forever, saving lives and uniting families, proving that even from the greatest tragedies, hope can be born.